Legendary cards started out with some pretty wonky rules. Let's talk about that. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, and welcome to my video on the evolution of legendary cards in Magic the Gathering. So, it has been an interesting journey all the way back from 1994 when legendary cards were birthed. Now, if you have not already watched the companion pieces, since it's split into two parts for this video, there is me going through all the legendary cards that were created, legendary creatures I should say, that were created at the beginning of Magic in one big batch. So if you want to know what they're like, because they're very much all over the board in terms of power and scope. So if you want to check that out, link is available here in the video. Go ahead and take a look at those first so that you have the background information that you need. And that being said, let us dive right in. Now, when Legends came out, they were a brand new thing. There were no multicolored cards before these Legends came along, right? So I should say legendary permanents from the set Legends. It gets a little confusing because it really originally just started as cards that were called Legends from Legends. And in the rules insert that came in every pack of Legends, there was a little paragraph on Legends and Legendary lands that said, Legends are considered creatures, except that there may only be one legend of the same name in play at a time. If a second legend of the same name is brought into play, it's buried. If more than one legend of the same name is brought into play at the same time, all of them are buried. Legendary lands are treated in the same manner, except they're considered lands instead of creatures. So as you can see, there are some differences right away with what you know as legendary cards. Originally, legendary was actually only the term used for the 5 lands that came in the Legends set. There was Teleria, Urborg, Pendelhaven, Hammerheim, and one that is going to slip my mind right now, but that's totally fine. Regardless, there's the set of these 5 lands. They were considered legendary. All the legendary creatures were just called legends and actually had the creature type legend, aside from the Elder Dragon legends, which had extra creature types. But everything else was a legend, and that was actually considered their specific creature type. And that obviously has changed, and we'll go over how that changed later on. But it started out with the legends as a creature type, and on top of that, this was a weird time in Magic history where the DCI, the guys that are responsible for determining what's on the banned list, what's on the restricted list, the tournament rules, they decided that all of the legends would be placed on the restricted list. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means, restricted list means you can only play with one of any given card. So when they first came out in Legends, every single legendary card was restricted. You could only play with one copy in your deck for flavor reasons. It wasn't for power reasons. It was for flavor reasons, where the DCI was like, well, it only makes sense. They're legendary, so you should only have one. And that is, I believe, probably about the last time that the DCI made any decision based on flavor as opposed to actual rules and gameplay. So Legends started out as a creature type. Legendary only applied to the lands. Started out on the restricted list. One of the reasons that they decided to change this is part of the problem with having things on the restricted list is it causes a high level of variance in the game in terms of games can be very swingy and determined on drawing that one copy of your powerful card. And because of the fact that at first they were like, okay, we're only restricting these to one, they didn't want to print too many powerful legends, because you guys don't know this if you didn't play back in the day, but I've been playing back when we had a restricted list, and the cards that there are only one of that are allowed, like Sol Ring and things like that, they tend to be very swingy and give you a massive advantage. And it can feel, I mean, obviously it feels amazing when you get your copy of the swing card, but it can feel like you're just getting games stolen away from you almost on a coin flip or like a lottery card kind of setup, where it's just like, okay, here you go, try it out, see what your luck is, as opposed to, it took away a measure of skill in a way. So they decided that they would make some changes. But as you can see, the original setup for it was, if a second legend of the same name is brought into play, it's buried. And if more than one legend of the same name comes into play at the same time, they all die. So if there's somehow a way where they all come out, they die. Now, you'd be wondering how this could be possible. I mean, things like clone will let you make a copy of a legend. So even if you somehow had just one copy of in your deck, you could have a clone and have 2 copies. So there's still ways that would keep happening. So they would have issues. They had issues, though, as they went along with these legendary rules. So they had to keep tweaking them to figure out what the best spot was. Now, for a long time, basically it was whoever gets the first legend out, their one lives, and then nobody can really play them. Like, you can't play yours just dies if you play it. The first one out actually lives. Now, when it came to Champions of Kamogawa, at that time, because they were doing an entire legendary block at that point, they really needed to revamp the legendary rules because they just wouldn't work with what they wanted to do. So at that point, what they decided to do was change it so that when you put out a legendary card, if there were other copies of the same legendary card out, then all copies of that legendary card would die. So if you have out legendary McGee and I put out legendary McGee, then both of our legendary McGees die. And the reason that they do this is, instead of you got out your legendary McGee first, now all mine are blank because I can't even play them. And they had problems like that in the Masks block with things like Lin Civi being erased to the first Lin Civi when Rebel decks were a big thing. The legendary rule really mucked things up where it was a matter of whoever gets theirs first is going to dominate the game. It's basically like, whoever gets the crown on, you can't take it off of me because I got it here. And then it's like, you got to kill my guy and put yours out. It was really wonky. I liked the change because it turned all the extra copies you had into blank cards waiting until that you were able to kill their copy into straight up, I can use this to at least remove your guy. So then if you're playing with 4 copies, and they had eased up obviously by this point, they had gotten rid of the restricted issue on legendary creatures a while before Kamogawa. But at this point, we were well into the you can play 4-ofs. So it was nice to see, okay, now you're going to sit here with 3 blank. Like, if you're playing a legendary creature that's a key part of your deck, you need to play 4 copies. But in a mirror match, it's just a matter of who gets it out. So it makes it more interesting in mirror matches. It actually turns the card into both the card it is itself and kind of pseudo removal, which is a nice step up. In addition to that, this is the point in time, the Kamogawa block, is when we see the change from legend being a creature type into it being a super type. A super type being something obviously different than artifact, creature, lands, things like that. It's something additional that can theoretically be applied to almost any kind of card. Of course, legendary doesn't apply to every kind of card because while they tried, they weren't really able to make things like legendary instants or sorceries. We can talk about their attempt in a moment. But anyways, the change here, what you don't realize is you think to yourself, well, who cares if Legends is a creature type? Well, it really required that when they made particular cards, they had to pay attention to that, because otherwise, if you had the ability to change creature types, you could make 2 copies. Like if I had out 2 grizzly bears and you made both of my grizzly bears legendary, then all of a sudden one of my grizzly bears is going to die. So it basically would allow for weird situations. Like there's a card called Artificial Evolution that lets you change a creature's creature type just as an instant. It just instantly happens, and it's a permanent change. And it specifically states that you cannot select Legend because Legend has that inherent rules baggage, and also on top of that also says, boom, I can use this now as almost removal, right? So they changed that. It was the same kind of issue they had with the wall type. Like wall and legendary creature types both had extra baggage attached to them that you just had to know. Like when you saw the legend creature type, you also had to understand that that meant something special, but it was just another creature type. So by changing it to legendary, they went ahead and basically already smoothed everything out because they had already created the concept of legendary and were using it with basic lands. So by taking it into a super type, now that super type applied to basic lands, it applies to creatures, and after a while, they've extended out from artifacts, creatures, enchantments, lands, planeswalkers. They all have this super type now. That's something we'll talk about though when we get to the planeswalker part, because that's a later on change. But anyways, this was the point when they ditched Legend as a creature type, which was an excellent move. Now, there wasn't another change until Magic 2014 came along, and that's when they decided that they wanted to change up the dynamic of, I have my Legend, you put out your Legend, it kills mine. So instead, they've changed it so that each player can have a copy of the same Legend out. But you just can't have 2 copies yourself. So you can have Happy McGee, I can have Happy McGee, we can both have a copy, but nobody can have 2 Happy McGees. So that's pretty cool. I mean, there are 2 cards that work outside the legendary rule. There's the Brothers Yamazaki, which are a legendary creature that if you have exactly 2 copies of them, the legendary rule does not apply to them. And there is a card called Mirror Gallery, which just gets rid of the legendary rule. So other than that, legendary rules apply as normal to all of them. The new change made it so that we would both be able to play with the cards we want instead of using it as a removal. It's like, I can get out Gus McPunchyface, you can get out Gus McPunchyface, and we'll see who uses them better. So That, to me, is an excellent change. And it also nerfs things, again, like blue was getting free removal on the back of this kind of stuff. You used to be able to clone legends to straight up kill them, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to clone your legend, and now they're both dead. Like, oh, you've got out your guy. I'm not even playing the same legend as you. But this clone can nerf any legend that anybody is playing, right? That's an additional level of power given to clone that was never intended, considering clone was printed at the beginning of the game. It never meant to do that. It was never meant to be used as removal. So there's that level is stripped away from it with this change, which is also excellent. So in terms of instants and sorceries, making a legendary spell of that nature is essentially impossible. The closest they were able to come so far was during the Kamogawa Block and Saviors of Kamogawa. They created a cycle of epic spells. The concept behind them is they're like a spell that's so legendary that you never cast another spell. It's like the big epic legendary spell. So how it works is once you cast it, you can't cast spells anymore. But each turn, it casts itself. It's this big recurring legendary effect that just keeps going on. So that was their attempt to make a legendary sorcery slash instant. I think it's really cool conceptually. Obviously, it's not fully the same as being legendary, but it does evoke the same sort of feeling to me. So that's the evolution of legendary permanents. I hope that you found that interesting. Thanks for coming by. If you liked the video, hit the like button. If you didn't like the video, hit yourself in the face because that's unacceptable. I'm running a dictatorship here. So sign up now. You don't have a choice. See you next time.
Hi, I'm Dalfort, and together we are the sixth colour of magic.